Honey, look at those beautiful clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it the best can. Stand around and be blind to the frost can. Taking no more, how can they relax? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. Just wanna see your smile, baby. Living on Earth, we must respect the Earth. Human and animal, we are disaster. Right to peace and opportunity.
This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio for another week of trying to assess the global insanity that we're all descending into, trying to give some bearing on it. The song that just played again, I've heard it too many times to count, Cry Die by Skull, which was put together by Morgan Carey, Mariah's older brother, great guy. And the lyrics in the storm certainly, or the lyrics in the song certainly are so applicable to our situation. You know, I look up at the sky and I wonder why. So many people do wonder why, and more so now, every week. I know every week we do this show for the whole winter, and I start off with saying the same thing about the train of winter snowstorms because they never stop. And this is part of the goal. Every week, another storm, sometimes two in a week, theatrical names. They want to go through the whole alphabet this winter, as they did last winter, because that adds to the theater, adds to the headlines. So we just passed Winter Storm Vulcan, and you can tell by the names. I mean, it's part of the theater, these theatrical names. I guess we're going to have Winter Storm Wiley soon, which is going to bring snow to, for example, D.C., which is pushing, I believe, near 70 today. It's going to drop back down to snow very briefly as they nucleate a certain area, as they've done again and again and again. Same places, Montana today, and tomorrow I think it's pushing something near 70 degrees, while Minnesota is down in the 20s. Montana is also supposed to get snow again soon. These radical fluctuations in temperature are thankfully finally waking some people up. But if we backtrack to 2012, where we had, for example, in March, a few fun facts here. March 2012, we had 15,232 high temperature records set in the continental U.S., 15,000 in March. Some of the high temperature records were broken by as much as 32 degrees. We had almost 100 degrees in the Dakotas in winter. Broke the former record by 32 degrees. Not 32 above normal, broke the former record by 32 degrees, about 50 degrees above normal, 50 plus. So what happened? Geoengineering was completely unleashed. And so now, let's fast forward to last year, where even in April, we had 4 winter storms in the same locations that we're getting them in now, so they can create headline after headline. We had, in the theatrical names, last April 2013, we had Winter Storm Walda, Yogi, Xerxes, and Zeus. Zeus finishing out the alphabet, which appeared to be part of the goal. So the train of winter storms continues this week, as it has last week, the week before, and all winter long. So we have new articles now confirming the northern hemisphere ozone depletion. Some may have seen this, and we'll get to Russ and Richard's opinion in a bit. By the way, Russ is with us here today. As always, Russ, extremely helpful all the way around in this whole fight against climate engineering, Richard as well. So my gratitude to them, but I'll ask their opinions on this when we get a little further along. But a new article's out, some may have seen this week, the Northern Hemisphere ozone depletion now acknowledged, but just as with so many other cases like the bee colony collapse disorder, for example, there's always some smoke and mirror, red herring excuse for why these things are happening. In the case of colony collapse disorder, they try to pin it on a farm chemical here or there, when any logical, rational person that would look at all the data would have to ask, well, then why are the bees just as dead 1,000 miles into the wilderness? How could it be a farm chemical? If those farm chemicals were always here, what's happened in recent years? Why are terrestrial insects in the wilderness? We know in Northern California, 90% decline. Nobody talks about that. How about aquatic insects? In remote areas, no farms, no sort of industry, aquatic insect life decline, 90%, according to U.S. Forest Service biologists who I know, who's done this for 3.5 decades. Nobody asked those questions. So in the case of the ozone, now they're claiming 4 chemicals they just didn't know about are causing massive ozone depletion. It's climate engineering. They're simply covering the tracks for the climate engineers, as they always do. That's their job. That's academia's job. There's so few people in the science community that have any spine. We've talked about this a lot, but it's just, I can never get used to it. So all the data is falsified at this point, from UV readings to radiation from Fukushima. We all know that that's being hidden. They just shut down detection. Temperature readings falsified. Everywhere we check, readings are higher. The actual readings on the ground are much higher than what's being reported. So methane, how about the methane? Are they really reporting on the methane? No. In fact, by some recent reports, methane is 20 times higher, atmospheric methane, than what's being reported. So this is the thinking of the power structure right now. Hide it. Just hide it. Lie about it. People, if you give them enough distraction, they won't care anyway. And it's been the case. It's been absolutely true. Just as long as McDonald's is flipping burgers and Walmart's open, people, for the most part, don't seem to care. And we'll get to that point in a minute, because I want to stress to all those that are working hard in this at this fight to leave behind those that don't want to wake up, because you'll waste your breath on them. Don't waste your breath. So why don't people respond? Normalcy bias. It's simply a normalcy bias. If things seem normal to them, they engage in magical thinking. And I just saw an episode with Chris Hedges on RTTV. Chris certainly speaks truth to a lot of issues. I wish he would speak about geoengineering, but maybe he's just not there yet himself. But magical thinking, normalcy bias, this sort of thing that causes people to ignore trouble until their head is literally on fire. They ignore health effects, allergies, every commercial on TV. It's astounding. Yeah, it's allergy season in some areas now, but it was the same all winter long. 2, 3, sometimes 4 commercials in a row about allergies. It's like the whole world has allergies now. Even ADD and Alzheimer's commercials are quite normal now. So people deny reality as long as they can. They just simply don't want to face it, period. And then we end up with the crisis cults. This is a term I heard Chris Hedges use as well, and it's absolutely true, the crisis cults, that as things get tougher and close in, you have certain groups that form that somehow fortify themselves in their denial and will find any reason but the actual reason to explain away what's happening. So when things start to get critical, and they are, the walls are closing in from every direction right now. So you have geopolitical issues, resource issues, you have the climate issues that, as I've said for a long time, and a lot of other people have said too, but they can't hide this much longer. I've held that position, and I hold it now. They can't hide it much longer. So as you have the reality starting to pop out from behind the curtain, the power structure is going to do something. So what do we see happening in Europe right now? The power structure, which really involves the Western powers, is pushing us toward World War III very, very rapidly. And what happens when they do that? And now we see the hypocrisy that's absolutely mind-numbing for John Kerry, again, to stand on a podium and insinuate or state that no country has a right to interfere in the sovereign affairs of another country, while we have boots on the ground in 156 countries. And again, those boots on the ground, much of it created through climate engineering, as I've said before. In Africa, perfect example, they've been droughted out with climate engineering for decades. They bring these countries to their knees. They allow boots on the ground to come in as relief efforts, so forth. Just saw it happen to the Philippines. Exactly what we said would happen. They enhanced Cyclone Haiyan, cut a swath through the Philippines. Now what do we have? U.S. setting up military bases in the Philippines right now. Much to China's dismay, that's the premise. So disaster militarism is what we have going on today. And when something like this is happening, what do we have? The distractions. There's always a distraction. When the power structure is doing something they really don't want the people to understand, there's always some event that comes up. What's the latest one? The missing jet. Isn't it astounding? They can track people on the ground with their cell phones, but they can't find and didn't realize that a jumbo jet just disappeared, that all the tracking devices just were shut off, and they can't imagine where it went. This is astounding to me. And there's a lot of stories circulating about who was on that jet and what this might really be about, and we'll see how it unfolds. But the bottom line is, it's headlines, every news station. So another distraction. At certain points we have other distractions, either school shootings, Minnesota bridge collapsing, Navy base shootings. There's always something that pops up when the power structure needs a distraction. So, Richard, Russ, what I want to talk about again, when we can't, it's astounding for the power structure that they can spot a suspicious tube of toothpaste getting on a plane, but they might lose the whole plane. That's astounding to me. How can people buy into this garbage? We're at a point right now where we're truly in a B horror movie, every one of us, and it's the sort of theme where we can see what's going on. A lot of us can. People listening can. I salute them for helping us in this fight. But so many people that surround each of us can't seem to get it. So, and I get a lot of mail messages from people who want me to engage in dialogue with this person or that person, because somehow if we just talk to them more, if we just explain it another 20 or 30 times, they'll get it. They're not going to get it. If they don't want to get it, they're not going to get it. It's that simple. We're challenging their religion, their perception of life, if you will. They're not going to get it until they're ready to get it. So my instruction or my advice would be to move on. Move on. Find somebody who wants to get it. Find somebody who wants to wake up. Russ, if you can, I want to get your take on this and Richard's too, you guys, both of you. But Russ, if you can open up for anybody who wants to call in to give us a question in any of these arenas we're talking about. Can you read the number out real quick, and then your perspectives, Russ, on those that don't want to get it, and is it worth wasting their time on them? And then Richard, your take on that as well.
Yeah, one thing, if you want to call in, our call-in number is 718-717-8296. That is 718-717-8296. And if you're on UCY.TV and you want to look at the chat, I post the number in the chat room. Just go to UCY.TV, click on shows at the top, and click GeoEngineering Watch Radio. And you can see our chat room, and you'll see that there. Yes, I have been long aware that mainstream media lies to people on a regular basis. I worked for the U.S. Taxpayers Party back in the early 90s, and we would have people who went to gun rallies, to abortion rallies, to anti-abortion rallies or other events to actually count the number of people who were there and get the official police records, and the media would lie about them every time. The government doesn't like guns in the public hands. This has been a long-term goal to eliminate that. So when there was a gun rally with 5,000 people, they would report 1,000 people. And they did this all the time. I'm also in the herb industry, and I noticed that they defame herbs. They've lied about studies. They do this on a regular basis. In fact, every day, if you watch the news and you know what you're talking about, you'll catch a number of lies every single day. So that's just business as usual. I do want to go back to the bees. You talked about, you made some really good points, Dane, about the bees dying far away in the forest. I lived in Jamestown, New York, when the spraying started there in 2005. That was when they started gridding the sky all of a sudden one day. And guess what? The next summer, no bees. The bees were all gone. And there were so many bees. It's very lush there. There were so many bees. You'd go outside with all the clover there and everything. You'd hear a hum. It would just hum. You couldn't even go out with bare feet because you would step on bees. Same thing happened in Bangor with the ladybugs. I moved outside Bangor, Maine in 2008. And there's a big ladybug colony, 100 there, hundreds of ladybugs there. A year later, they started spraying really, really hard. They had 2 weeks of real intense spraying. Guess what? The whole colony collapsed all of a sudden. So I don't believe that it has to do with this, with the pesticide that it's being blamed on. There's always has to be a cover story. So I think that's a really great point. People have to use their common sense. You asked why Why are people shutting down? I agree with what you said, Dane. I would tell people, don't waste your time with critics. There are enough people who have common sense and open mind. If you come across somebody who wants to argue with you, just move on and find the people out there who want to be active and who care about this. People are waking up quickly, and we just got to find them. Keep getting the word out.
They want it, in this case too, that a lot of people I get messages from that insist that I have to talk about aliens, that I have to talk about transhumanism and all these subjects that there may in fact be validity to. I'm not trying to deny possibilities. I try to keep my mind open to all those possibilities. But the fact is, if we want to move the ball forward in this arena with climate engineering, we have to stand on solid ground and not constantly muddy the water with subjects that are whole separate areas of debate. So this is what I would argue is, don't waste your time with people who don't want to wake up. Don't deviate from the compass heading of the subject at hand. That if you're trying to introduce this subject, you need to focus on tangible, solid, indisputable data. People who don't believe what they can see with their own eyes above us are not going to believe in transhumanism, whatever that may be. I don't doubt that there's genetic experimentation going on in everything, including us. I don't doubt that. I think we have enough data to certainly conclude that. But the fact is, how much can any individual digest or comprehend? And if you try to plant the whole oak tree and ram it down their throat, it's not going to go. It's not going to go. You simply have to I know that it's a propensity of everybody to want to include everything in every argument. It can't be done. It can't be done and have any effectiveness. It just can't, in my opinion. And I think that if we all learn to focus on the solid, tangible items, the items that are of most concern, if people know their head's on fire, if they really understood they're being poisoned, all the other little intricacies way deep down in the rabbit hole become irrelevant. It's not really relevant at that point. If that's enough to mobilize them, knowing they're being sprayed like rats, then that's what we need. And to confuse or muddy the situation with too much data is not helpful either. And again, Richard, the kind of people that I know I sound frustrated because I am frustrated with the kind of effort that's spent on certain people by activists. They're trying to wake up a certain individual. Move on. That's my point. Move on. It's like wasting your time with a troll. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying everybody who doesn't believe this issue is a troll at all, but I am saying that if people don't want to wake up, they're not going to wake up, and you're not going to make them wake up. If you plant the seed, move on. I mean, Richard, you've engaged in enough of this too. Is this not true?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's true. I don't think that arguments and debates that just keep going and going are a good use of energy at all. I think our time is limited, and it should be used for so many people that really are sincerely looking for answers and explanations to understand things, and they are the ones that really need our attention. So every time we waste it just arguing with somebody that likes arguing, we're doing a disservice to the people that really want to know.
And we're all guilty of it. I've certainly been guilty of it. I remember when my wife came here. My wife's from Lithuania. I met her there. I've been to Kiev. I've been to St. Petersburg and areas there to see. I went to see what the people really like there, and certainly found what I thought I would find, that they're just like us. I went when I was much younger, of course, but I was trying to eliminate certain biases, but I still held them. And when my wife came here, she had certain perceptions of people, for example, or governments, in the case of, for example, Israel. And I don't mean to insinuate the whole country by any means. It's the Zionist government that I simply can't feel good about. And it's not the Jewish people. There's a lot of great Jewish people. But that government, when our media doesn't cover that the Israeli government has violated 136 UN mandates, 136, but all we hear about is the dozen or so that Saddam Hussein violated with the WMD that he never had. And we talk about the weapons of mass destruction, of which Israel is thought to have 200 to 400 nuclear weapons. They'd never signed the non-proliferation treaty. The bias is so incredible. And I held this bias. I actually remember staunchly defending the government of Israel with my wife. She was right, and I was wrong. And that government doesn't deserve to be defended, does not deserve to be defended. Now, I'm not saying the Jewish people, again, there's a lot of great Jewish people, and in fact, I think many of them are really going to be powerful and instrumental in raising awareness and increasing sanity. Great people, but just like our government and the governments of a lot of other NATO countries, the governments are completely out of control. Completely out of control. They're not doing what the people want by any means. But yet you see this bias. And I see bias with people here that are very engaged in the geoengineering issue, the fight, even former military people, which I know. They recognize that the government's spraying them, but somehow when it comes to the events happening, for example, right now in Ukraine, they immediately side with our government. They have no clue what's going on, but they just know, even though they know they're being sprayed by their own government, somehow they have a certain blind nationalism still. Can you explain that, Richard? I mean, is it not astounding?
People feel comfortable having a team to identify with, like in a football game. And, you know, they're not ever going to say their football team in their high school or their professional team, you know, is bad for some reason. They're just going to say they were misunderstood or they got a bad break from the referee or whatever, but it's their team. And with the vast majority of the public that thinks very superficially about virtually everything, USA is their team, and they don't realize that the government that is in current control of the USA has nothing to do with America whatsoever. It's a branch of a globalist cartel that has other things in mind and has no interest in any particular country at all.
True of every country, though.
It's not their team.
True of every country, though, right, Richard, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just the U.S. All these countries are being used in some way by the cartel that wants global domination and eugenics, and that's what's going on. And the people in the various countries don't realize the difference between their country and the government that's taken it over.
The people are the country. Yeah.
They're staging these divide and conquer methods in country after country after country after country. How many do we need to see happen? Caracas, Venezuela, right now. Same thing that's happening in Ukraine is happening right now in Caracas because the power structure is pushed into a corner. They're pulling out all the stops. They know the end draws nigh, so to speak. It is. And these guys, we're very close to something happening. I can't claim to know exactly what it is or how it will unfold, but it is unfolding now. And we see things, for example, like the Baltic Dry Index. It's called the BDI. It's the most untarnished indicator of true global economic activity there is. It's shipping, container shipping from anywhere to anywhere. It's virtually off a cliff. It's not happening. China's crashing. This whole thing, this whole industrialized society facade is imploding. It can't not implode. It will implode. And the only question is, will we, before it implodes, while we still have communication, will enough people get up off their backsides and help expose the epitome of human insanity, which is climate engineering? That's the absolute epitome. Here you have this layer of miraculous material that surrounds our planet that allows us to live. The atmosphere is as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball. How insane is it to fly thousands of jets around spewing toxic materials into that very thin veil of life day in, day out? There is no greater symbol of human insanity, and I hear from so many people asking the same question again and again and again. This can't be. Nobody would do this to themselves. I can't imagine people ask that question. It shows a true level of denial and simply unwillingness to look at reality. How many examples do we have in front of our face? From fracking to nuclear power plants to nuclear bombs, nuclear detonations, GMO. How many examples do we need to show that the human species, by and large, is not sane? This is just a trait, but it's up to...
Right, and it's not just the human species. There's a very particular subset of the human species that is not like the average people, and that is the one in charge of the planet right now. And they're way beyond the problems of the average person. And also I wanted to mention that you brought up the airplane that disappeared. And Lorraine Murray is a really interesting lady that I've talked to quite a bit. She was interviewed by a friend of mine named Alfred Weber that's also well known. And she's a very good investigative scientist, and she really believes that the disappearance of that flight is most likely and almost certainly a weapons demonstration by the U.S. in response to the weapons demonstration of the Russians, which was the Topo missile that has really now made surface ships almost obsolete because it flies 10 feet over the water, over land, and can't be seen coming in. It can sink any ship that's out there right now. And the U.S., she thinks, and gave some really good backup information, that she thinks that they demonstrated one of their energy weapons that's capable of vaporizing an airplane, but it has to shoot from about 10 miles away, which means on the surface of the ocean right below it. And she's pretty sure this is what happened.
I like Lorraine Murray, and she's done a lot of great work. And she may be right about this. I've seen some other stories as well that seem plausible, that there was certain groups of scientists on this plane. One says Chinese scientists, that this is the U.S.'s last effort to try to capture some of these guys and acquire certain information before they really unleash World War III. Or, it's hard to say, but certainly I do like Lorraine Murray. She's spoken out on a lot of issues and with a lot of credibility. So
and she's pretty thorough in her research, and she's very good, and she knows how to explain things. And the whole point that I agree with that she's making is that World War III is not some kind of a thing they hope won't happen. This is designed to cause it. It's not only a distraction. They've been writing about wanting World War III for a long time. In fact, before they even started widespread spraying. So this is another agenda tied to all the other ones that are going on at the same time.
When they're backed into a corner, that's what they do. Yes, that's what they've always done. Another war. And when you look at it, it's just astounding the lack of understanding that the American population has because of the mainstream media and the focus on Iran, and how many people are so quick to demonize Iran because of the media's attempt to make them demonize Iran. Iran hasn't invaded anybody for 250 years, more or less. Nobody. The U.S. has invaded 50 countries in 50 years. Well, who's the aggressor? Who's the aggressor?
Right.
That's my question.
Most of the people in Iran really like Americans as well. They totally understand that the American government has nothing to do with the American people.
It doesn't, but I still put a lot of responsibility on the American people to wake up and disconnect from the umbilical of propaganda, which is mainstream U.S. media. And so many people I know, people in my own family, who absolutely will not be pried from their bubble. They won't. That's where they like it. That's where they're going to stay. They don't care if the whole world has to burn down in order for them to stay in their comfort zone. They don't care. And I don't have much regard for people like that anymore. I don't. So what I would say is this. What we're trying to do is, I mentioned this to you guys off the air, what do we do when people that we're trying to reach are unreachable, when they will not respond? We change our tactics, correct? And what we're trying to do now, for example, in the universities, which during the Vietnam era raised a lot of opposition, we're trying right now, I'm trying with a number of universities to saturate them with the color glossy information flyers and supplying thousands of these. It might end up being tens of thousands pretty quick to a number of people who are going to try to get those flyers into the universities. I have 2 speaking events at college right now to try to distribute those flyers as well. So I'll say this over the air. If there's anybody listening who has any real end with student groups, clubs at a university that they think would be a good outlet for distributing flyers, please contact me. You can reach me through GeoEngineeringWatch.org or through Russ at Global Skywatch can tie people into me. So I'll send that message out now. If you have a means or a contact at a major university that you think could be an effective means of getting these data flyers out, I want to hear from you. So we're going to continue to try this, to try to start as many spot fires as we can with people who want to wake up and not continue to pound our head on the wall with people who don't want to wake up. So, Russ, again, we talked about this off the air, and this student-wise now, I've contacted somebody even at Kent University, where we know the Vietnam situation was extremely intense, and that was nothing more than raw aggression by our government. So you think those fires can be ignited again there?
Yeah, I do know the fires can be ignited again because people who learn about this are mad. I want to encourage people and let people know that I'm getting emails every week, almost on a daily basis, from people who are waking up to this issue. And when they wake up to it, they immediately know it's true because they've seen people getting sick, upper respiratory infections, immune suppression. They've seen these outbreaks of illnesses, and they've seen the lines in the sky. And the people who somehow inside are open to this, when you tell them, they wake up very quickly and they respond and they become active. So I definitely encourage people to do something and hand out these flyers. It's a very, very effective way to do it. And I would also say about the whole war issue, the saying of the Masons, people have heard ordo ab chao, and it's not just the Masons. It's actually a philosophy of creating order from chaos. And that's what we're on the brink of right now. So we need to wake the public up to what's going on in this respect. Geoengineering is the biggest thing because nothing else matters if you can't breathe the air. So yes, there's hope. But if everybody who knew about this had flyers in their hands, was willing to do something, were willing to do something, we could turn this whole thing around. I truly believe that, but we have to be motivated. The people who are open to this, who are ready to believe this, are out there. We just have to reach them.
Yeah, and bypass the people that aren't. Just bypass them. Don't engage
waste your time with those people. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's just so many, and you can spot the people who are really aggressive, as psychoanalysis and some of the articles that we've posted explain, that those who toe the official narrative, whether that's their ideology or whether they're paid to toe it, they're often very aggressive, abrasive, abusive, and they're so easy to spot. Bypass them, skip them, don't dialogue with them, don't feed them with that. Just completely ignore them and move on. So with this, as the walls close in, we might be heading for World War III very quickly. We have the referendum on Crimea tomorrow. We have the threats being leveled by the U.S. government, the unbelievably hypocritical threats being leveled. And Richard, both of you guys, I don't know how much you've looked at the Crimea situation, but have you guys seen any of the mainstream media stories about what's happening there, the U.S. mainstream media stories? Have you seen anything, and what's your perspective, if you have?
Richard?
Yeah, I have, and they're not surprising. They're just, trying to paint the U.S. government as honorable and benevolent, and that the Russians and the people involved in anything against U.S. policy are evil. And so, that was exactly what would be expected. And the thing is that the Russians have been based in the Crimea for a long time. They have major holdings there. They have military bases. It's not entirely, some kind of a foreign country for them. But the point is, even if it was, it's none of the business of the U.S. government, no matter what's going on over there. And not
critical. We have boots on the ground in so many countries. Now we're occupying Haiti because of the disaster. There are more bases being built in Japan now. Philippines. I mean, my God, how deep is
and none of this is the business of the U.S. government at all. Its only job and reason for existence is to protect the individual rights of Americans, and that's it. And about 98% of what it currently does is purely illegal. And as far as planning for what they want to do in the Ukraine, Obama just signed another executive order. He's signing executive orders all over the place, way more than other presidents before. And this latest one can put you in jail for disagreeing or saying anything publicly about what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, that's where we're at, isn't it? In the meantime, what do the American people do? They're so easily distracted. It's astounding to me that, again, in the North State where I live, people who know about the atmospheric spraying, they know how sick it's making every one of us, the environment, so forth. And yet, as soon as the power structure throws a big distraction out there, like transgender bathrooms, that's a pretty ridiculous thing to throw out there, but they did. And they do it for a reason, though, because a lot of people bite the bait, they forget about the house burning down, and they start pursuing this big distraction that was thrown out for them. So now we have a whole group in Northern California that is not concerned about geoengineering anymore because they're fighting about transgender bathrooms, as if that's going to matter very, very much longer. I'm not saying I agree with transgender bathrooms at all, but I'm saying it's a distraction. See it for what it is.
The other thing about this impingement on free speech or complete denial of free speech, that this little trial of declaring it illegal if the government says that you were, helping, I don't know helping what, but, disagreeing with the policy in the Ukraine, that you could be put in jail, then as long as nobody really objects to that, and even if they do, then from this point on, they could start having executive orders banning conversation about any topic they want. And it's very likely to happen.
Why wouldn't they when they get away with anything? They get away with blowing up buildings in front of our face, killing American citizens in order to try to have the premise to invade yet more countries, and Americans do nothing. In fact, they toe the line by having this sort of marginalizing mentality with anybody who questions the official narrative. It's astounding. But again, this is
going to be more than marginalizing too. It's going to be just picking you up. And I think, from what it looks to me, just from common sense, I think all these executive orders are just completely illegal.
Well, they are, but people are so biased that, and all of us have this. I'm not saying we don't, but my wife and I, again, we debate about. She's certainly being from a former communist bloc country that was nothing more than a captive country from Soviet Russia. She has very clear memories of how oppressive that was, and I can't deny that. I mean, they literally, and I've been there. Again, they dragged the beaches, for example, in the resorts at night with tractors in order to be able to see footprints if anybody has made their way down to the beach to try to escape across the Baltic Sea. I mean, they were prisoners in their own country, literally. I don't deny that. Russian government killed 30+ million by some reports of their own population just to maintain control. But this current situation, so people, what I debate with my wife, and she's right, that if perhaps if Russia had the power, was in the position of the United States, they'd be behaving the same way. She's probably right. But they don't have that power right now, and the fact is the group that is toppling governments around the globe is the NATO powers, is the Western powers. It's our government. So the fact that we have a whole room full of criminals here, when we do, all governments are mostly in the same category, but the big bully in the room right now is the Western governments, and the most dangerous because they're being backed into corners. Their economic systems are failing, completely failing as economic systems are around the globe, and they will not give up their power. They have a massive military machine, and they're going to use it. They're going to use it to maintain their hegemony. They will, and that's where we're headed. So people need to try to wake up as fast as possible. And again, those that are in this fight, I would argue this, that I would rather have a pack full of I don't want to use the term wolves, a pack full of people who are willing to work together toward a common goal, as opposed to a herd full of sheep that can't figure out which direction to go. So people need to decide where they fit into that. And those that, as events unfold on the ground, those that have chosen to focus on the most assertive methods of raising awareness, we may yet make a difference. We may yet be able to affect this equation and take a quantum leap in the right direction. And supposing climate engineering would be, I would argue, that quantum leap. No matter what's going on, even with World War III about to fire up, if the world's populations really realized that this was going on in our skies and they're all being poisoned and beaten down, and when countries don't conform like Slovenia, I challenge anybody, Google, I just put an article up about this, Google Slovenia ice storm, and look what happened to their country when they decided not to go along with the program with the EU. Their country was wiped out with a 6-inch ice storm. It's never been seen before. It leveled most of the country. We don't hear about it here. Do you guys see any photographs from that?
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, I haven't seen anything like it before. Yeah.
No, and remember, Dane, we were also talking about the fact that even though it looks to the public like nothing is being done with respect to Iran right now, their country is actively being completely destroyed by geoengineering by eliminating all of their water.
It is.
Which is pretty serious crime against humanity.
Same thing here in California. You know, you don't. I know this is something we rant about a lot, but it's hard not to. The Weather Channel, to watch their shows, it's absolutely astounding. They have literally theater on in the last week. It's like a little skit they do as to where the biggest, baddest winter was, which city was the biggest, baddest winter. Those are the exact terms they use, by the way. They don't talk about that we're literally in meltdown here in the West. In meltdown, it's 20 degrees above normal day and night, every day, with almost no exceptions. Everything's dying. It's hot as hell. It's weather warfare. What else can you call it? It's weather warfare. So, again, I hope people, instead of being discouraged and brought down by the direness of our situation, I hope they take that energy, decide exactly how they can move the ball forward every day, who they haven't talked to that might be a good prospect that could start a fire of awareness, and focus on that. Focus your energies on what you can do instead of what you can't do. And effective tools, again, the universities, I hope I hear from some people that have some contacts there. We just need to keep hammering until we put a crack in the dam. And once the dam cracks, it's going to blow. There's too many people that know about this and too many people that are now realizing they're going down with the ship, period. So we just need to not lose our stride.
Don't you think, Dane, I think there are a lot of cracks in the dam already. I think, like you've said before, the meteorologists know what's going on. Many, many scientists know what's going on. You can't be an atmosphere scientist of any sort and not know what's going on, and at least that this is. So I think that these people are probably dying to talk. They want to open up and speak about this, but they're being held captive because of their job. They're being threatened against talking. Pilots the same way. I've had pilots call me. I've had a 25-year veteran pilot, one of them, 25-year veteran pilot said, "Thank you for what you're doing, for exposing this." He said he's never seen anything like this, these trails. He said engines don't make trails. So I agree with you completely. I think the cracks are already in the dam. It's just a matter of putting more pressure on the public to wake up so that these people feel empowered to come forward and take a risk of losing their job. It needs to be socially acceptable to come forward, and we need to have
cover. They need to have cover.
Right.
Exactly. That kind of cover. And, we live in a society right now where everybody is cooperating with the collective delusion. The collective delusion of when you see shows like Bloomberg and all these financial shows that talk about this and this and this are going to happen in 2030 and 2040. On the track we are on, based on the best data available, if we stay on this track, we're talking about a northern hemisphere that will not sustain any life by 2030. What difference does it make what Social Security will be doing in 2040? We won't be here. We won't be here. And society as we know it can't continue. It won't continue short of some unforeseen outside intervention from forces as of yet unknown. We have oceans that are just about dead, food stocks that are just about gone. It will not continue in its present form, period. So people should keep this in mind when they're watching news programs and financial programs that talk about different things that are 20, 30 years out. It's absolute total delusion. But people have seen too many science fiction movies. I watched somebody on RTTV today. I didn't get his name, but he's done some program called Zeitgeist, and there's a lot of different films and
Peter Joseph.
Pardon
Peter Joseph, maybe Peter Joseph who did Zeitgeist.
That's the film, though, right?
Yeah.
This is different. This is completely different.
Okay.
And that's why I want to be careful using that term, because the Zeitgeist film was good, and I passed out a lot of those. But this is somebody else. They've used the same term, but their basic premise was this: that there's more than enough to go around. There's no shortage of anything. That we all just need to share. We'll all live happily ever after. It's total delusion. I don't subscribe to the capitalistic form of government that's happening right now. Or of anything. I mean, that obviously didn't work. But the notion that there's plenty to go around right now, and that if everybody just had a garden in their yard and sang Kumbaya, that everything would be fine. That's delusion. It's simple delusion. But given the reality that we have, people, if we focused on what we can do and the sanity that we can spread and propagate, that's what can affect the equation still. So I hope people, regardless of how dark the horizon is. Go ahead.
But Dane, wouldn't you say that it's that the reason for doing this is to keep people sleeping? It's almost like the document Owning the Weather by 2025. They own the weather now, but the reason they say, "Oh, we'll own it in 15 or it was 20 years out or 25 years out or 30 years out when the document was written," is the same psychology they're using now. They're saying, "Oh, we're considering doing geoengineering in the future," but they're doing it now, and it keeps the public asleep. In the same way, they say, "Oh, well, we can make everything all right." It keeps people asleep, doesn't it?
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. I mean, the same with the quote-unquote environmental groups like EPC. We brought this up before, the Kyoto Protocol, that for biodiversity in 2010, where ETC participated in the quote-unquote ban on geoengineering experimentation. It didn't mean anything. It was absolute nonsense. And yet, a lot of people found the excuse they needed to go back to sleep. It's the same tactic, yes, exactly the same. But and the human brain is not wired for most people in a way to recognize longer-term threats. If it's not right there banging down the door, they ignore it. But it is here. It is banging down the door. And again, in the coming weeks and months, certain things will become very apparent to people. One, that our planet is not what it was and will not be that way again. And two, that we have precious little time to try to radically alter course, or quite simply, we will all be gone. That's what we face.
People underestimate the sophistication of disinformation. They underestimate it all the time, and that's the problem. People have to understand that those people who put out disinformation understand how we work better than most of us do, and that's why they have the upper hand.
It is.
Russ, we have a lot more to go to really cover this thoroughly, but I thought it might be interesting to slip in at least one phone call if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, call-in number for those who want to call, we still have a little bit of time left, 718-717-8296. It's 718-717-8296. Caller, your number that ends in 01, welcome. How are you today? Caller, you still there? You've been with us for a little while on the panel. You still there? Caller? Hello?
Hello?
There, you're live. How are you doing today?
Oh, I was just calling in to listen.
Oh, you're just calling in to listen. Okay, well, that's one way to listen. That's good. That's good. Well, back to, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, go on.
Russ, if you get anybody that wants in, though, you can holler and butt in, and we'll get right to anybody who wants to actually interject here. But the bottom line is, right now, again, the situation around us all unfolding quickly. We have in the next few days, we'll see what happens in Crimea and those areas, and the bias that the American population seems to feel toward whatever their government wants to do, I hope takes a turn in a different direction. But I hope that something helps to wake up the sort of same blind nationalist behavior that has brought us into how many wars. In the start of the Iraq situation, the last Iraq invasion, I had about 200 brand new commercial copies of Hidden Wars of Desert Storm, a film by Gerard Ungerman, internationally award-winning film about depleted uranium, what we use on our own soldiers. How many Americans know that? Gulf War Syndrome, 200,000 American soldiers infected with this toxic ammunition that we use. So I had about 200 of these films. I'm passing them out at a candlelight vigil the night before the U.S. was illegally invaded Iraq. And I had my photograph taken from every direction possible from 3 undercover government people of some sort. And it was astounding their spineless behavior. When I asked them if they were patriotic, they said yes. I said, well, these tapes are to try to support our own troops, that they're being poisoned, contaminated. It didn't matter. Their indoctrination is so complete. They only see that this is their job. This is what their boss told them to do. It's a mentality that's literally pushing the human race to extinction. We are very close to near-term extinction, not long-term, near-term. And it's behavior like that that allows it to happen, because everybody's just, quote, doing their job. So these guys were quite content photographing me from every direction possible. And then the next time I tried to cross Shasta Dam, which is the second biggest dam in the country, and you can actually use it for transportation, but you have to go through a little checkpoint. And I went with a resident who lives on the opposite side of the dam, goes across all the time routinely with people. As soon as I was there, can't cross the dam now. They had to look at my license. They had to do all sorts of things. So because I cared about the troops, because I had the audacity to pass out informative, accurate documentaries about what our troops are going through, now I'm considered, a terrorist? Because I actually care to support our troops? And that was then. How much worse is it now?
And this is all to suppress speech, isn't it, Dane? I mean, isn't that the bottom line, just to scare people, really, ultimately, just to shut people up?
It is. It is. I mean, I hope people aren't intimidated by that, even if they go through what I've gone through. I hope they're not intimidated by that, because we are all on the end of the plague, period. The water's coming over the deck of the ship now. Now is when we find what we're made of. Now is when we stand up and we make our voice heard. Now, or we won't have tomorrow, period. So people should not be intimidated. They should not be worried about it. I see people who want to put aliases on their emails and so forth as if that matters. Those in power know who everybody is, and that's good. And if they listen to our conversations, that's good, because then they can see that we're not radicals, we're not irrational. We simply want something to be left for our children, period. That the insanity must stop or we are all going to die, period. And so we shouldn't live in fear of these people listening or monitoring. We should hope for that.
Dane, I would also say, I'll bet you we're going to learn one day that these disinformation programs and these monitoring programs were in constant turmoil when we finally get a glimpse behind the scenes of what was going on during this time in the future, looking back, because these people were learning about what was going on. They were shocked, and they didn't stay in their positions very long, or they became advocates for what we were talking about. Isn't that interesting, a thought?
As things unfold on the ground, I think that's more likely to happen. As people see that the ship is indeed going down, as people begin to realize, for example, people involved with geoengineering programs, that what they are doing is anything but for the common good. That what they're doing is literally eliminating any chance they have for a future, any chance their children have for a future, period. And we simply, all of us, those of us who are willing to engage, those who are willing to actually stand up, take action, make their voice heard, do it now, do it the right way, do it effectively, and we can yet affect this equation in a manner that might be absolutely astounding if we simply all work together in the right fashion. If we start these spot fires of awareness, again, the universities are a good one. If anybody has any other very appropriate suggestions, I certainly would like to hear that. And you can contact me through geoengineeringwatch.org. But I'll try to distribute as many flyers as we possibly can. I'm ordering another 20,000 in the next day or two, and we will try to distribute them as best as we can to the right places, the right people. And
plus, Dane, people can go on geoengineeringwatch.org and they can print the flyers out themselves on their own printer.
They can.
About 10, 20 flyers and hand them out. Yeah.
You're right. And now that you've got that working again for us, Russ, I mean, for those who have tried to download those flyers in the past, we had a problem with the link, but Russ has got that fixed up for us. It's working now, and yes, you can download those. Any local print shop, print them and get them out there. I mean,
or on your printer. Print them off on your laser printer or your inkjet printer. Just print off 5 or 10 on a weekend and pass them out.
You can. And we'll also have a link for them to be acquired through the site again also. So I'm trying to, for universities and so forth, I'm trying to provide everything we can on our dime, but we'll have them available on the site soon again also at what amounts to our cost. So we're trying to make them available in every way possible. And a lot of times the flyers work better than a DVD because people don't get to the DVD. We'll also soon have commercial copies of the last PowerPoint, Climate Engineering, Weather Warfare, and the Collapse of Civilization in a commercial case copy, and that might be a good tool for people as well. So the bottom line is, though, figure out the most fertile ground that you can find to wake people up, and now that we have World War III perhaps unfolding, again, the immediacy of our situation would dictate that we all engage in this to the degree we're capable of, and not like so many people I know that know about this issue. Again, they go right about their own personal pursuits of pleasure, whether it be all week long. I'm not saying we don't all need a break. We all do. But the bottom line is most people, this is a once-a-month pastime for them to engage in this fight. And that's not going to get it done.
I also wanted to mention at some point, Dane, that I spent a lot of the last few days watching many hours of documentary films on Ukraine and Ukraine history and what's going on there. And it's really been a tragic long-term series of various groups who wanted to control the resources of the country coming through and being willing to murder any number of people in order to get themselves into positions of power. And it seems that happens all over the world on a continuous basis through recorded history. And what's happening now is that the U.S. government and other governments are willing to do the same thing to the Ukrainian people as their whole history has done to them. And they're just, sitting in the middle as the victims because they happen to be in a desirable location.
You're exactly right. In fact, Ukraine has some of the most fertile soil in Europe. And so those resources are sought after. And what you have now, people will argue, well, you had a lot of the bigger percentage of the population that wanted to get rid of this corrupt government. That's true partially. You had 55% of the population that wanted that change. But what they did not want, and what they got, just like the Egyptians got, is they had power brokers installed, not the sort of democratically elected officials they wanted, power brokers. You have literally oligarchs being installed in Ukraine. In fact, taped phone conversations of U.S. diplomats and leaders of other countries like Estonia talking about who they were going to install once they got this done. And this was before the collapse in Ukraine. So this is nothing but orchestrated chaos. That's what it is with the puppet power brokers put into place, just like Afghanistan and Iraq and all the other countries that we see the same pattern. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. You had snipers you had discussions between U.S. diplomats and Estonia and presidents talking about the fact that the snipers were part of the opposition and that they were paid for and funded by opposition people, and they were killing police and killing opposition people to create this chaos. It's on tape. Our media doesn't cover any of that.
Yeah. One of the things that I would point out too, the systems are all in place right now to descend on Ukraine, including the IMF, whose business is to steal resources by giving unpayable loans and then taking the country as collateral, which has been shown to work really well around the world. But the reason that these various corrupt leaders and insane people get to take over is because other people will be their soldiers, and they're willing to play their part for money or for food or whatever rewards that they're getting. As soon as that stops happening and all the potential Edward Snowdens start talking and all the reluctant soldiers stop doing the bidding of these masters, they're going to have a lot harder time destroying the planet.
Well, they will. Russ, I'm going to give you the mic to finish things off here in a minute, but I want to end with this, that we are truly in free fall toward a collapse of everything that we have known. And the data dictates, the data backs up what I'm saying. If people abandon their bias, if they abandon their preconceptions, they look at the data, they'll realize the urgency and the immediacy of our situation. Do what you can while you can before our paradigm goes on its head, and we may yet affect this equation significantly. So focus on getting data out to those that will listen, ignore those that won't, and don't give up. Please don't give up. Those that are willing to try. We need everybody in this fight. So, Russ, I'm going to let you sign off because I know the time frame or the end of the show comes a little bit early sometimes. But anyway, my thanks to Richard and Russ for all their participation in this, and I hope that everybody listening evaluate every day what you can do to move the ball forward that day, not to waste time engaging with people who don't want to know, but actually what you can do to pass on credible data, plant seeds, and help to start spot fires everywhere you can. That's what we need to do. So, Russ, I'll toss it to you to sign off. And again, thanks for your participation, Richard, as well.
Actually, in the few seconds we have left, I also want to throw in to encourage people to talk to people a little technically if they want to learn about the fact that the jet engines used on all large military and commercial jets today are called high bypass turbofans, and they don't produce trails. There may be extremely rare circumstances where they will, but they're extremely rare, so much so that most people will never see them. The first high bypass turbofan was created by General Electric. It was called the TF-39. It was designed in the mid-'60s, and it was used on the Lockheed C-5 Galaxy. Ever since that time, because the high bypass turbofans are much more efficient than the low bypass turbofans and turbojets, there have been in widespread use. Even the 707s, which originally had small turbofans, have had them replaced with high bypass turbofans, which don't create trails. Tell your friends and family that. We'll see you here next week on GeoEngineering Watch Radio at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time every Saturday at UCY.tv. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.